Hi, Dan from Academy 365. In this video, we're talking SharePoint permissions. Permissions are something that can confuse a lot of people. So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on what's the default behavior of permissions on a SharePoint site. How do you create them? How do you administer them? All of that stuff we cover in this video. Then we'll talk about ways that you can customize permissions in case you do have a requirement that calls for it. And then finally, we'll wrap up with some best practice on managing permissions and administering them on your SharePoint site. So with that all being said, let's get into it. Okay, so permissions in a SharePoint site. Well, in this video, we're going to focus on just SharePoint only, okay? So we're not going to look at group connected team sites because while in theory it's a SharePoint site underneath it all, there are some nuances. So if I was to go into that, I think it would get a bit confusing. So I'm going to use a communication site as the example that I go through in this video, but pretty much all you see here is going to apply to the team sites with some slight nuances, as I mentioned, but I'll cover them in a separate video. So I think the best place to start is with an analogy. So you can see here that we have a SharePoint site. So what I want you to do is think of your SharePoint site like a house and think of permissions as keys to that house. So you can't come into the house unless you have a key. Exact same principle in SharePoint, okay? On the site here, I can look at the keys that I have by default here. So by default, we get 3 keys to our house. We get site owners, site members, and site visitors. And the difference between these is what having that key allows you to do on the site. So if you have the site owner key, what it means is you get full control of site content, team permission settings, site settings, and hub associations, okay? There's a couple of more things to it, but in general, they're the main things people care about. Site members, on the other hand, well, these are mainly contributors to the site, okay? So they can edit and view site content. They can create new structures within the site. So if we're using the house analogy, they can create new rooms within the house and they can move the furniture around in the room and they can add stuff into the rooms, okay? So that's what the members can do. And then when we look at the site visitors, well, site visitors are like visitors to your house. They can come in, but they have manners, and the manners are enforced on them. So they can't change anything, they can't add rooms, they can't move stuff around, they can just have a look, okay? They can snoop around your house. That's what a visitor can do. So they're the main keys at the moment that we have to our house. Okay, bear with me. So the way we give these keys out to people is we assign them the permissions or keys, okay? So I can come in here to site owners, okay? And I can drop down and I can see that Dan Carroll, me, I'm an owner of this site. And the way I got access to this, well, I created the site, so I got it automatically. But if I wanted to add someone and give them access to this, I come to this box here and I start typing their email address or their name, and they'll pop up here if they're within the organization. So I will say Daniel Carroll. Again, I could say this, and it will say what permission or what key do I want to give Dan in this case. So I can say read, that's the default, so that means that I'm a visitor, I get the visitor key. I can say I have edit, that's the member key, or I could say I have full control and that's the owner key, okay? So we can do it like that, we can add people in one by one, quite simple. When you choose the key that you want, if I said full control in this case, then what we can do is we have this additional piece where I can send them an email message which welcomes them, so they'll get an email in their inbox saying you've been invited to, you know, come and view this house, so come on in. But you can tick this off if you don't want to do it. And you click share, and then that person is given that key and now they've access to the site. Similarly, take this guy out of here, we can add people to a house or give them permissions by adding in a group. So this is a really good option if, say, you have a lot of visitors, okay? So in an intranet setting, there's you want kind of everybody in the company to be able to come in and view the content, not change it, just view it. In that case, it'd be quite difficult and quite a pain in the, you know, to add them in one by email address. So that's where we use groups. So if there's a group there already, and it can be a Microsoft 365 group or a security group created in Entra or Azure Active Directory, as it was called, as long as people are in them groups, you can add that group to here. So a group that you create with a Microsoft team, for example, that is a group you can put in here. So if I put in Academy 365 members, I have a team that's called Academy 365, and this lets me add the members to the site. And what that means is that the membership to that group is maintained in the team, and it means that whoever's in that group at any one time, they will have access to this site if I add them. If they get removed from that group, the access is removed, okay? So that's quite handy. A group that you should be familiar with, especially in an intranet setting, is a group called Everyone Except External Users, okay? And this is great, right? So what this is if you select this group and add it and give it a key, it means that everyone in your organization will get the level of access that the key grants them. So in an intranet setting, you'll typically put this in and give it the visitor key. And that means that your site is effectively internally public. which is quite handy. So they're the main differences. We can give the keys out one by one to people, or we can give them to existing groups. It's quite handy, and how you do it will depend on your requirement, but they're your options. Now it's worth noting that you can also add external people to these sites. So everyone in your company has the same, say, email address as you. But if you want to invite in an external partner, that's also an option. I'd recommend you talk to your IT department about it, because they should have a policy in place or rules around how they do that. So let me add the groups that I mentioned there. So I'll add in the everyone except external users. I'll give that the visitor key, which is read. I won't bother sending the email, and I'll just say share. And now when we come back in here, we'll see that under site visitors, I've given that key to basically everyone in my company. It's quite small. But then if I'll just add the members one again, okay? So Academy 365 members, add them in, and I'm going to give them the member key. So I won't send them an email either. Put that in, and now we can see that we've got a very simple setup where I'm the owner. I essentially control this site. I've got people who work on my team, and they can come in and edit and add content and help me out to build out the site. And then I've got visitors, which is our audience, who can come in and view everything, okay? So it's as simple as that. So we've given access to these people, given them different levels of access, different permission levels. So what does that actually mean? Well, there's a concept in SharePoint called permission inheritance. And what that essentially means is that when we give out the keys at the site level, which is what we do here from this share menu, it means that the people have that level of access to everything in the site. And that's the permission inheritance, okay? So if I went into site contents, for example, the people I've given the keys to, the owners have owner access to all of this stuff. The members have edit access to all of this stuff. And then the visitors have view access to all of this stuff. It's quite simple, okay? And to be honest, if you can, keep it like that, because what I'm going to show you in a few minutes is how you can change what them keys mean in different locations, and how you can even change what people can do who have them keys in specific locations. So that's where I said it can get confusing, and if you make too many changes, it's hard to keep track of. So try keep it simple, straight out of the box, but yeah, we'll get into how you can change it. So the first thing you might want to do with permissions is change who has access to what. So like I said, inheritance means everybody that we set at the site level has access to everything. But let's say, for example, you have a document library on your site, and this document library has some documentation in it that you don't want visitors to see. You're happy with members seeing it, and you're happy with the owners seeing it, okay? But you don't want the visitors to see it. So in that case, we do something called breaking permission inheritance. And the way that works is if I come into documents here, so we might have policies, presentations, and reports. And like I said, we don't want the visitors to see it. So the way we can change that is we come up here to the cog, and then we go to library settings, and then we go more library settings. And then when this loads up, we get this lovely interface here. And we click on permissions for this document library. And that basically brings us to this interface that lets us really get into the management of the permissions for the document library I'm in. So we can see here that we have an option up here that says stop inheriting permissions, right? So that means that I am inheriting permissions. And when I'm inheriting permissions, I can't change any of this stuff, okay? Because it's locked to whatever's happening at the site level. But if I stop inheriting permissions, I click this and just say okay. We can see now that we have more options, okay? So I could come in here and I could click the visitors, and I could say remove user permission, and that will remove the users from here. So even if I have a permission key, I cannot access this library. I won't even see that it exists. And that's a way that you can keep this secure. I could also grant additional people permission just to this location if I wanted. I click grant permission, and then I'd type in the email address or the group that I want to share it with, and they'll be able to access this library and this library only. They won't be able to access anything else on the site. Totally fine to do, and the option is there, but you need to remember that you've done it, which is why it's best to keep things simple. Can't say that too much in this video. So what I'll do here is I'll actually remove the permission of the visitor. So I'll say remove user's permission, and I'll say okay, and now they're gone. So anyone with that member key, tough, you're not getting in. It's good to know, right? If you get to the end of this video, and if you do, thank you. But if you get to the end of it and you've just got excited and you've changed everything on your site in different locations, and now you don't know where to go or how to get it back, you can always come up here to delete unique permissions, and if I click that and say okay, it's going to essentially restore it back to the default, the site level, which is handy to know. Okay, so now we know that we can remove keys from various locations, and I came into this through a document library, but if I came back to site contents and I came into a list, for example, locations, and then I came up to here, very same process. I go to list settings and I go to permissions for this list. I get the exact same options in here, right? So no matter where you go, you're going to end up in this type of screen, and it's applying to where you are, okay? So let's say, okay, now we know how to remove keys from certain locations, and that's fine, but you can also change what a key allows people to do in certain locations as well. So if we wanted to change what the visitor key can do, or say the members key, right? By default, they can create, edit and delete. Say we wanted to stop them being able to delete. You can only add stuff, but you're not allowed to remove stuff, okay? That means we need to change the privileges that key or that permission level has. And to do that, what we can do is we can say stop inheriting permissions, and we can say okay, and then we just select the members, and then we say edit user permissions, okay? And then in here we can see that we have these other levels in here. So I said that you get 3 keys by default, you do, but there's different levels of permission that you can assign to those keys. So we have design, edit, and read. They're the standard one. But then we have these in-between ones. We've got design, which is like full control, but there's certain things that you can't do. You've got contribute, which is a little bit more than read, but a little bit less than edit. So you can't go creating new document libraries and new lists and stuff like that, but you can still contribute to ones that exist. And then restricted view basically means people can view, but they're not downloading anything. It's really locked down. So we could assign a different permission level to the key that we're in, okay? So we could say the members can contribute, but they can't edit. And this will mean that you as the owner can control the overall structure of the site, and then the members can just contribute to that structure you've created. If we left it at edit, then they can also build on structures. So we can change this to contribute, and we can click OK. And now we see that the permission level assigned to the members key for this location is contribute rather than edit. So that's a way you can change the permission levels to some other defaults that they have. Now, if you do want to go down the road of saying, no, I like the edit key, right? The permission that people get with that is perfect. I just want to stop a specific action from happening. Well, then what we can do is we can edit what that edit permission level actually means, okay? So to do that, right, and you'll get it now when I show you, let's say we come to home again, okay? And what we'll do is we'll come up here and we'll click on the cog and we'll go to site permissions, okay? So this is a very similar interface to what we had when we clicked share. We just get a few other options in here, which I'll cover in a few minutes. But what I'm looking for here is advanced permission settings. So when we came into this screen before, a few different options here, but when we came here before, that was to do with a specific list or library. This is to do with the whole site and how the configuration works at the site level. So I can come in here and I can say permission levels, okay? So remember, edit, full control, and read are permission levels. These are the keys that we give a level of permission to, and the keys are what we hand out to people, okay? But if I go to permission levels, so again, related to this, I'll click permission levels, and now I can see the list that we were able to basically assign to the keys in here. And this is where you can get very granular about what that permission level actually means. So I could come in here to edit, and now I can see all of the specific things that permission level allows people to do. So things that they're allowed to do with lists, to do with the site in general, and to do with personal permissions, things like that. You can read through this yourself, but this is where you can actually see what that allows people to do. So like I said, if I was in here and I wanted to edit the edit permission level, and I said people who have this, so which is the default level for the member key, I say I don't want them to delete items anymore. I would untick that, and now I click submit. And what that will mean effectively is anybody who has a key that has the edit permission level assigned to it, so that's the member key, they can no longer delete content on this site. So there's certain circumstances and scenarios where that is something you want. Now, another thing you can do is, if you want to get really fancy, you can add a permission level, okay? So that means you create a brand new one. So we'd have a 6th option in here. The handiest way to do it and to keep you on track is to find the one that's closest to what you want to do. And then what you can do is we'll go back into edit, say, and what we can do is come down to the bottom and we can say copy permission level, okay? So I'm going to say copy, and I'm going to call this one Dan's edit, okay? Just so I know myself. And now we can start ticking or unticking whatever we want in here to customize this permission level exactly as we want, okay? I'll leave it the same, but you could change anything you want in here. So I'll say create, okay? So now we see we've got Dan's edit in here, and I can come back to permissions and I could say, okay, the visitors on this site, site-wide, I'm going to edit the user permission. And now I want all visitors to have Dan's edit, right? Rather than read. And I can click OK. And then that gets applied across the site. Now, remember when I said permission inheritance means that locations will just inherit whatever we say here. If we've already broken that inheritance in a certain area, these changes won't apply there. And this is another example why if you do go around changing these things and you change them in a lot of different places, it gets hard to remember what you've changed and what's actually going on. So it's here, you can do it if you need to, but you know, with great power comes great responsibility, someone once said. So one thing to note and bear in mind that if you start changing things at this level, okay, if we came back to home, for example, and I click share again, we no longer have easy access to give out the keys from in this interface. It's always going to now send us to advanced permissions where we need to add members in here rather than the pretty UI. But it's the same thing. You just know that if I want to add more members, I go to grant permissions and I can come in here and just add in the email addresses or the groups exactly like I would have before. But that's just a step you're going to have to do when you start to edit things a lot. One additional thing you can also do in here, so we have our keys, we have our permission levels, we now know how to add new permission levels and assign them permission levels to existing keys. We can also do what's called create a group. This will create basically a new key. So we could have members, owners, visitors, and superheroes. And we could have a superhero permission level. And we could just assign it to that. And then that's something we can start to hand out to people. So it's very powerful. You can do a hell of a lot in here. You just have to be disciplined enough to do it methodically and remember what you've done, basically. You can always come in here and check the permissions of any person to see what they do have access to. That's absolutely fine. But like I said, it's just more work and overhead for you as the owner to keep on top of it. So now that we know how to do everything at a container level, so a list or document library, or at the site level, and how to change everything up, and one last thing that we'll say is that when I come into documents, we can change the permissions as if it wasn't complicated enough. We could actually change the permissions on a specific folder or even at a document level. The interface is a little bit different for that. If I wanted to change policies, for example, say I wanted to restrict access to this, I'm fine with the default permissions for the library, but that policies folder, I need to do something with that. Well, basically I can select the policies folder and I can come over here, and if this isn't here, all I have to do is click the little information. I can say manage access, and this is going to be the exact same information that we've been looking at all along. It's just presented a bit differently, okay? So I can see how it's been shared, whether it's with people, with the groups. These are our groups or our keys, but I can come in here and I can say remove direct access, so I could remove the visitor's access just to this folder, or I could make it read only. There's lots of different options you have in here. Again, it's just another way to get even more granular with permissions to this policies folder in my document library. So you have loads of options. So hopefully I haven't scared you with this. This is really about awareness, so you know what your options are and you know how the default works on a site. So some best practices, or recommendations at least, that I think you should stick to when it comes to permission management in your site would be: use the principle of least privilege. What this basically means is don't give out access to your site, particularly access where people can change things, just to anybody. Make sure you're giving it to people who need the access, okay? It's much easier to understand what's going on if you haven't given out permission to absolutely everybody. Where possible, assign keys to groups rather than individuals. It's much easier to manage a group than it is a long list of individuals, especially with giving out keys and the different levels that come with it. So if the groups are available to you, absolutely use them. If you do hand out the keys or give permission to individuals, keep an eye on it from time to time. Go into the groups like we saw there and see who's in them. You can always go into the cog, go to site permissions, go to advanced permission settings, and I can come into the members, owners, visitors, okay? Whichever one I want, I just click into it and it's going to give me a list of all the people that are in here, okay? So do keep an eye on it from time to time. People leave the company or people switch departments that are still in the company, so you just want to keep an eye on who has access. Make it a scheduled thing that you might review every couple of months. And finally really is that, if at all possible, ignore the majority of this video, okay? Well, I shouldn't say that. What I mean is be aware of it, but try not to customize things if you can, okay? Microsoft doesn't charge by SharePoint site. So if you have a site that has content in it that you need to restrict, well, create another site and keep the permissions quite simple. We can always link sites together through navigation, and we can always audience target navigation. There's lots of different ways to take care of the user experience, but the sites as permission containers, try and keep it simple. It will save you a lot of hassle down the road. So there you go. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of how permissions work and the possibilities with permissions, and also plenty of words of warning in there on, you know, don't get yourself into too much trouble. I hope you found it useful. If you have, please like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. It really helps me with this channel. If you have any comments, suggestions, let me know in the comments below. And until next time then, I'll say see ya. So bye.